Will there still be a reason to buy this thing with the upcoming Master Grade Extreme? Let's find out. And the box wastes no time telling you all about the most important features of this version of the kit, which by the way was provided to me by my favorite online hobby store, Hobbylink Japan. Links to buy your own down below. So not only does the box clearly tell you that it's the full burst version, but the Strike Freedom also has all of its weapons just as they're about to fire, and the Dragoons are flying around all over the place. Now, at first I thought it might have looked a bit better if the Strike Freedom was actually in the process of firing his weapons, but the way it is now does emphasize the Strike Freedom itself and its Dragoons more. And on the side of the box we get more details about the stuff that this full burst version comes with, including gold-coated parts. But pay close attention to the gold coating on the promotional images. This will be important in a second. And on the other side, we get a nice view of all of the gimmicks that it comes with, and also some more action poses that it can pull off. So far, things are looking nice and shiny, so let's see what we're actually getting in the box. We get the usual multicolored A runner, a white B runner, and 2 white C runners, but I noticed something interesting on the A and B runners with the V-fin. They were on a cutoff point labeled in Japanese with "for domestic use," so meaning for use in Japan, and then there was a gap right next to it, which would suggest that there are kits out there which were distributed to foreign markets but with a slightly different V-fin. So let me know down below if you know the difference or if you actually have the foreign version. For now, my best guess is that maybe it's got safety nubs to satisfy stricter regulations or something. But whatever the case might be, next up we get the golden runners, which come in a few flavors. Reused from the original Strike Freedom mold are the unfortunately non-coated H runners, I runner, J runner, and N runner. The reused but now coated K runner, and the new and also coated P1 runner, and the polycap runner, which is a particularly nasty shade of gold. But the most interesting thing is definitely how they went about the P1 runner. Even though it's a new runner, it actually consists of parts that are on the H, I, J, and N runners, but now they also have some degree of undergating. So while it is cool to see that they put some extra effort into this full burst mode, this P1 runner only consists of most of the visible gold, which you will soon see when the thing is put together. So moving right along to the stuff for the Super Dragoons. 8 clear rods to mount them on, 2 light blue L runners, and 2 dark blue M runners. Followed by parts for not just one action base, but 2 action bases. Something you definitely don't see every day. Then there's also the dark blue D and G runners, the light blue E runner, and the gray F runner. And finally, we've got the effect parts, a screw for one of the action bases, regular stickers, marking stickers, rub transfers, and another thing that you don't see every day, a small clear plastic poster. Unfortunately, mine has a cut at the top. So yeah, putting that aside, for more cool art, you can leaf through the manual where you'll find a lot of line art and internal details that you can admire while you're building your Strike Freedom. And here it is, completely built. And first things first, I absolutely love the proportions of this thing. I've always had a soft spot for the styling of mid to late 2000s master grades, and this is no exception. But that's not to say that everything is perfect either when it comes to the looks. Remember when I talked about the golden parts a minute ago? Yeah. Not only are some parts plated and others non-plated, but in the joints, we get this ugly combination of both plated and unplated gold, making the unplated parts look even worse than they already did. I frankly do not understand why Bandai didn't just go the extra mile and plated everything that's in sight. I can understand them not wanting to plate the entire inner frame because it's gonna be covered up anyways, but this is the main machine from Gundam Seed Destiny. Put some extra effort into it. And as for the undergating, it's effective in some areas, but again, the coverage isn't quite 100%. And since we're on the topic of painting, let's have a look at the stickers. We get the usual eye sticker, 2 front camera stickers, and 1 back camera sticker. And unfortunately, the camera stickers aren't metallic. But on the positive side again, then, the front camera stickers and the eye stickers do have a clear part behind them, so if you want to paint them, you can have a cool see-through effect. The other stickers then are 2 dark blue ones for the beam sabers, 1 for the beam rifle's pop-out sensor, and 2 blue ones for each of the beam rifles. While this wasn't unseen back in 2006, it wasn't particularly great back then, and it definitely ages this kit. So then, as for the things that you still have to paint, gray for the muzzles of the Sea-Whiz guns, blue for the sensors of the beam rifles, red for the insides of these vents, and gold for these parts of the ankles and the shoulder thrusters. And the last one I find particularly striking because there's already a golden part underneath, so why couldn't they've just had this thing poke through? Moving on to the seam lines then, where it is mostly the same story as with everything else. For the most part they're good, but just not 100%. And the final things when it comes to the looks then are the marking stickers. We get a sheet of clear stickers and a sheet of rub transfers, and you gotta love the way that Strike Freedom is written on them. So in terms of looks, you're still gonna have to put some work into your Strike Freedom to turn it into the perfect Strike Freedom. But with that being said, I do still overall like what we're getting straight out of the box. And underneath the armor, we're greeted by the 2 extremes. On the one hand, an extremely flexible inner frame, especially for the time, that is also very well detailed. It would almost be a shame to cover it up if it hadn't been for the cheapo gold. So enough talk about that gold, let's have a look at the accessories and the weapons that this thing comes with. On the head we have a pair of sharply molded 31mm Sea-Whiz guns. In the abdomen we have the Calidus multi-phase beam cannon, which has now been redesigned to be more angular versus the more rounded anime version. And the hips then is where the fun begins. Stored on it right now are 2 MA Mark 21 KF high energy beam rifles. To use them, you simply fold in the storage peg, fold out the handle, and attach it to the peg inside of the hand. And like this, you can either have your Strike Freedom dual wield them, or if you prefer to have them combined into the long range beam rifle, you extend the stock of the rear one, slide out the stock of the front one to unveil the high precision targeting sensor, and also fold in the handle, and then you simply combine them to allow your Strike Freedom to snipe its targets with ease. And now with the beam rifles out of the way, we can deploy our Xifios 3 railguns. And I was honestly surprised by how smooth and simple the transformation is. And whether you have the railguns on the side or on the back, they also lock into place. So they definitely put some good work into designing this signature mechanism of the Strike Freedom. And deploying the railguns themselves is similarly painless. They just fold out and even have a nice master grade exclusive extending mechanism to reveal some of that beautifully detailed inner frame. It's just a shame that it isn't coded. The beam sabers then are on a rotating holder and, just like the beam rifles, slot snugly into the hands. You can either use them individually or click them together to form what is officially known as the ambidextrous halberd. None of this is a halberd, but anyways, what surprised me here was that the beam effect parts aren't the usual straight ones, but the lesser seen curved ones. And the only master grade that immediately comes to mind that also used these was the master grade Wing Gundam version Kotoki. And the final weapons then are of course the 8 Super Dragoons mounted on a very elaborate backpack. Removing them is simple, they just slide out, and reattaching them is much the same. And yet they're not so loose that they would just fall out either. Honestly, they're perfect. The wings themselves then is where all of the complexity is. To put him in his signature pose, you first fold open the front wings a bit, and then when you move the rear wings, you'll trigger a mechanism that will slightly open the individual dragoon carrying things. It's very subtle, so you might miss it if you don't know that it's there. And then to complete the look, you can also extend each of those dragoon carrying things. Another master grade exclusive thing that makes the strike freedom look just that little bit more impressive. But back to the dragoons themselves now. With the regular version of this kit, you couldn't do a whole lot with them, unless you were going to modify some things, but this is the full burst version. So each dragoon gets its own thruster effect that can then be attached to a bendable clear rod that can then be attached to the included clear blue action base number 1. And when you then use the new connector that attaches to the Strike Freedom's butt, you can have a really cool diorama of the Strike Freedom with all of its super dragoons flying around. But to be honest, I do find these new full burst parts to be a bit lacking. First of all, the thruster effect doesn't line up with the thrusters of the dragoons, despite being specifically made for them. And second of all, the included rods are rather short, making the dragoons feel more like they're hovering above the ground, rather than them chaotically flying around all over the place as we see them do in the anime. If only there was some way to display them in a more dynamic way by only using the included parts. If only. Also, since this thing is called a full burst mode, it would have been cool to also get an effect part for the Voiture Lumiere system that we often see spouting out of the wings when the dragoons are deployed. Another effect part then that I would have loved to see included in this full burst set was a second beam shield effect part, because the beam shields on this kit work really well. The one included beam shield looks really nice, and even though it is a bit of a hassle to put it onto the generator, once it's there, it's not going anywhere, and you can even rotate it around if you want to. But anyways, on to the other accessories that we do get. There's another action base included, the one that you've seen throughout most of the review, which I think makes this the only model kit that comes with 2 action bases specifically for the single main mobile suit. The connector, by the way, is shared between the two, which is why earlier you saw the action base 1 without it. And what sets this thing apart from the action base number 1, other than the looks of course, is that the movement is locked. You have 3 positions for forwards movement and 3 positions for sideways movement. And while you might think that that makes it more secure, it doesn't. And the other difference is that it also has a compartment on the bottom to store the cover piece. Next up then are 2 nicely detailed in-scale figures of Kira and Lacus. There's the poster thing I talked about during the unboxing section, and finally we also get some leftover parts. Every shiny piece, except for the things that the dragoons connect to, is still included as a non-shiny part, making it more convenient for painting, and we also get all of the normal connectors for the action base number 1. So if you get this set and decide to use the other action base, you can still use this thing as any old action base number 1. So now, let's have a look at the articulation, because in this department, it's definitely not a pushover either. Well, technically it is, but we'll get to that in a second. The head is on the usual hinge and ball joint combo, allowing for some really good upwards and downwards movement, forwards and backwards, and rotation. And we get even greater mobility in the shoulders. They go backwards a bit, forwards a lot, which then also allows them to go nicely up. And just because it can, the shoulder armor can also go up and down, and then the arms themselves will also go up nicely, rotate around all the way below the shoulder, bend at the elbow on 2 joints, and then the hands are the typical 2.0 fare. They're on a ball joint and hinge combo, giving you some extra upwards and downwards movement. The thumb and index finger are on their own ball joint, and the other 3 fingers are molded together, but they do still have their own ball joint. So technically you can separate them. But if you're not going to paint, that is probably going to leave some extremely ugly nub marks on those plated fingers. The torso then is much more rigid, with a simple peg taking care of the rotation, and only forwards and backwards movement. For the time though, this was pretty good, and on the bright side, it doesn't have any problems holding up the backpack. There's even this hatch on the back that prevents it from slouching backwards, and by opening it up, you unlock the full backwards movement. The front skirts then, as well as the back skirts and even the side skirts, are all on ball joints, giving the legs some pretty good forwards movement, really good backwards movement, and also really good sideways movement once you use those ball joints to angle the rail guns out of the way. Warning though, this can cause the ball joints of the rail guns to get slightly disjointed. The legs then will also rotate around, bent at the knees on 2 joints with some really good armor separation. This panel opens up, revealing some more thrusters, and finally the feet are on the usual hinge and ball joint combo, but unfortunately the hinge on mine is so weak that my strike freedom can hardly stand up without the backpack, let alone with the backpack. Once the backpack goes on, it's just a matter of time before it falls to its inevitable doom. Maybe that's why they didn't just include 1 action base, but 2. But anyways, the ankle armor is on a ball joint attached to the heel, and we also have a toe joint. Then there's an opening cockpit revealing the tiny pilot inside, and finally there's also a hinge and swivel joint for the wings on the backpack. So overall, in terms of articulation, this was a pretty impressive kit for the time that still holds up well today. The weak ankles are a bummer, but fortunately, Bandai offers us 2 solutions in the same box. So as always, the inevitable question is, do you want to buy this? And well, I honestly feel quite conflicted about this, because even though I quite like the set, I definitely cannot wholeheartedly recommend it. The strike freedom itself is really nice, like I can feel the effort that went into designing it and making sure that everything didn't just work, but worked really well. It's just the extra full burst things that completely drag it down. With almost every single thing that the full burst adds, there's either something wrong or they half-assed it. And it's not like there's that much extra to begin with. It's almost impressive. Why did they think that coding only a fraction of the gold was a good idea on the special deluxe edition of the flagship mobile suit from Gundam Seed Destiny? Honestly, I would say you're better off buying the normal version and using the money you saved to buy a can of gold spray paint. Because even if you get this deluxe version, you're gonna have to paint it anyways. Or, you know, don't buy this thing at all and start saving up for the upcoming Master Grade Extreme. So to answer my question from the beginning, I definitely think the Master Grade Extreme is going to be the kit to get. unless you really prefer the looks of this thing over the more detailed Master Grade Extreme. So for some size comparisons then, since I can't really take it off of its stand, here it is next to the Master Grade Freedom Special Coating version, followed by the Destiny Gundam Extreme Burst Mode, which is the same idea as a Strike Freedom here, but done with the Destiny Gundam, and also, in my opinion, was a much better execution of the idea. And then finally, here it is next to the standard-sized high-grade Gym Custom, and the usually bulky high-grade Zaku 3. And that has been all for this review of the not quite full burst Strike Freedom Gundam, provided to me by Hobbling Japan. If you want this thing or its normal counterpart, links are down below. And as always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.